The world can be cruel to those who are different, especially when that difference comes with vulnerability. Please don't take my wheelchair. The desperate plea of a little girl echoed through the hallway, breaking hearts and revealing the darkest side of humanity. But sometimes, fate intervenes in mysterious ways, bringing unlikely heroes into our stories when we need them most. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The autumn sun filtered through lace curtains in the White House at the end of Willow Creek Lane, casting deceptive warmth across the living room carpet. Inside, 8-year-old Emily Parker clutched desperately at the wheels of her custom wheelchair as Loretta yanked it backward, the metal frame scraping against the hardwood floor. The little girl's fingers, small and determined, left marks on the polished chrome as they slipped away from her only means of independence. "Please, please don't take my wheelchair," Emily sobbed, her voice cracking with desperation. Tears streamed down her flushed cheeks, dropping onto the pink unicorn pajamas she still wore from the night before. "I need it to go to school tomorrow." Loretta Parker straightened her designer blouse and looked down at her stepdaughter with cold, calculating eyes. "If you can't walk, then you don't get to pretend to live like a princess," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Maybe a day without it will teach you some gratitude." The stepmother's words hung in the air like poison, far more painful than the physical separation from the wheelchair. Emily's rare genetic condition had never been a limitation in her mind until Loretta had entered their lives 2 years ago, bringing with her a shadow that seemed to grow darker with each passing month. "But I can't!" Emily's protest was cut short by Loretta's raised hand. "Enough! Your father works too hard to afford these luxuries, and you treat them like toys." The woman dragged the wheelchair toward the hall closet, its wheels catching on the edge of the Persian rug. Emily pulled herself across the floor, her small body straining with effort. Her pajama bottoms caught on the rough edge of the carpet, tearing slightly at the knee. "Dad said it wasn't a luxury," she whispered, more to herself than to Loretta. "He said it was my freedom." "Your father says a lot of things," Loretta replied dismissively, shoving the wheelchair into the closet with unnecessary force. The metallic clang echoed through the otherwise silent house, a brutal punctuation to Emily's imprisonment. "He'll be gone for another 3 days. Until then, you'll do as I say." Left alone on the living room floor, Emily's sobs quieted to whimpers. The Connecticut morning continued its peaceful progression outside, oblivious to the cruelty within these walls. Birds chirped in the maple trees lining Willow Creek Lane, and somewhere a neighbor's lawnmower hummed, ordinary sounds that now seemed to belong to another world entirely. The child dragged herself to the bay window, leaving small handprints on the polished floor. From here, she could see the community center where her tutoring sessions were held, sessions funded by Grant Westmore's foundation. If only someone knew what happened behind the perfect white facade of their home. If only someone would come. The crash of the front door against the wall silenced Emily's sobs. Framed in the doorway, Grant Westmore stood like an avenging angel, his tall figure backlit by the morning sun, streaming through the entrance. The millionaire's unexpected presence filled the room with an electric tension that even 8-year-old Emily could feel through her tears. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Loretta straightened, her fingers still gripping Emily's wheelchair. "This is a private family matter," she said, her public charm sliding into place like a mask. "I don't recall inviting you into my home, Mr. Westmore." Grant stepped fully inside, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. When a child is being abused, it becomes everyone's business. His eyes, normally calculating when closing real estate deals, now burned with an intensity that made Loretta take a step back. Emily watched in disbelief as the real estate mogul crossed the room in 3 long strides. She had only seen him from afar at community events or in newspaper photographs cutting ribbons at building openings. The philanthropist was known throughout Connecticut for his wealth and influence, but his presence in her living room seemed impossible. "Maria called me," he explained, glancing briefly at Emily with unexpected gentleness. "She's been worried about what's happening here for weeks." At the mention of Maria, Loretta's face contorted with rage. "That woman works for me." "She had no right." "She works for me," Grant corrected firmly. "I've arranged for her to help here twice weekly, and thank God she did." Emily's heart raced. Maria, her part-time caretaker, had always been kind, bringing small treats and whispering encouragement when Loretta wasn't listening. The girl had never imagined the woman was connected to someone as powerful as Grant Westmore. With deliberate movements, Grant took the wheelchair from Loretta's grasp. "This stops now," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've seen enough." He turned to Emily, kneeling beside her despite his immaculate suit. "Would you like to come with me for a while? Somewhere safe?" Emily nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Enough." Grant stood, his voice booming through the house as he faced Loretta again. "She's coming with me." Loretta's mouth opened and closed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "You can't just take her. There are laws." "Yes, there are," Grant agreed coldly. "Laws against child abuse and neglect. Laws I intend to see enforced." He gently helped Emily into her wheelchair. "My lawyers will be in touch, very soon." As he wheeled Emily toward the door, the businessman's arrival had transformed into something more. A rescue, a declaration of war against Loretta, and the beginning of a battle that would ripple through their quiet Connecticut suburb for months to come. Emily Parker's life had been slowly unraveling for more than a year. The change began with her mother's sudden disappearance, a mystery that remained unexplained to the 8-year-old girl. Her father, once attentive and loving, gradually withdrew into longer work trips and late nights at the office, leaving empty spaces where family dinners and bedtime stories used to be. Into this void stepped Loretta, her stepmother of only 2 years. What had started as polite indifference quickly morphed into something more sinister once Emily's father began his extended absences. Loretta seized control of the household with calculating precision, treating the child as nothing more than an inconvenient reminder of her husband's previous marriage. "Your father works so hard to pay for your special needs," she would tell Emily, emphasizing the word special with thinly veiled contempt. "The least you could do is stay out of my way." Emily's rare genetic condition had manifested shortly after her 5th birthday. The diagnosis came with the reality that she would need a wheelchair for mobility, a fact that seemed to particularly irritate her stepmother. Loretta viewed the child's disability as a personal affront, as if Emily had deliberately chosen to require extra care and accommodation. The once warm household on Willow Creek Lane had grown cold. Where laughter and music once filled the rooms, silence now stretched between walls adorned with family photos that felt like relics from another life. The garden where Emily used to help her mother plant flowers was now neglected, much like the child herself. Each day brought new small cruelties. Loretta would forget to help Emily reach things placed deliberately high on shelves. She would schedule social events when the girl's physical therapy was supposed to take place. Meals would mysteriously run out before Emily could have seconds, despite her small appetite. Most painful were the whispered phone conversations Emily sometimes overheard. Loretta complaining to friends about the burden she had inherited, lamenting how the child's condition limited their social standing in Connecticut's elite circles. The isolation grew more profound with each passing month. Emily's once bright spirit dimmed like a light being slowly turned down. She stopped asking when her mother might return. She ceased reminding her father of promises to attend school events. She learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. Her only remaining joy came from her weekly tutoring sessions at the community center, a brief escape from the emotional winter that had settled over her home. What Emily didn't know was that these sessions, funded by Grant Westmore's foundation, would soon become the thread that would pull her toward an unexpected rescue. Despite the darkness that had enveloped her home, Emily found refuge in the small moments of joy that punctuated her week. Every Thursday afternoon became sacred to her, the day when her father would reluctantly drive her to the community center for tutoring sessions. These 2-hour escapes were funded by the Westmore Foundation, though Emily had no idea the millionaire behind the charity had begun taking a personal interest in her situation. Grant Westmore had built his real estate empire from nothing, transforming Connecticut's landscape with luxury developments that catered to the elite. Yet behind his imposing business persona lay a man haunted by his own losses. The weekly reports about the bright 8-year-old girl with the rare genetic condition had initially been routine updates until Maria Gonzalez began including concerning observations. "She had bruises on her arms today," Maria had whispered during their meeting 3 weeks ago. The caretaker's eyes had welled with tears as she described how Emily's wheelchair had been accidentally damaged twice in 1 month. "She's losing weight, Mr. Westmore. And that woman, she speaks so sweetly when others are around, but the things Emily tells me." Maria had been working part-time at both the community center and occasionally at Grant's estate for nearly 2 years. Her gentle manner with the children had always impressed him, but he never expected her to become his most valuable informant. Each Thursday, she would spend extra time with Emily, secretly documenting the girl's declining condition while offering what comfort she could. "I should have said something sooner," Maria confessed one evening, her hands trembling around her cup of tea in Grant's office. "But I was afraid of losing my job. Emily needs someone there, someone watching." The weight of her guilt was visible in the dark circles under her eyes and the way she constantly checked her phone for messages from the center. Maria had become Emily's silent guardian, slipping the child extra snacks, listening to her stories, and most importantly, believing her when no one else would. Grant had initially planned a more measured approach, perhaps speaking with Emily's father or involving proper authorities. But when Maria sent him the photo of Emily sobbing beside her overturned wheelchair last Sunday, something inside him snapped. The businessman who calculated every risk found himself driving to Willow Creek Lane without a strategy or legal standing. These small acts of vigilance and compassion, Maria's careful documentation, Grant's growing concern, the community center staff who noticed Emily's fading smile, had converged into the perfect storm that Monday morning. What began as quiet advocacy had transformed into the dramatic rescue that would forever change all their lives. Emily clutched her teddy bear tightly as Grant Westmore's sleek vehicle pulled into the circular driveway of Pinewood Rehabilitation Center. The building's warm brick exterior and colorful gardens were a stark contrast to the cold atmosphere of the home she'd left behind on Willow Creek Lane. Her 8-year-old eyes widened with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "This is just temporary, Emily," Grant said, his voice gentle as he helped maneuver her wheelchair from the car. "But I promise you'll be safe here." The center's director, Dr. Amelia Frost, greeted them with a warm smile that immediately put Emily at ease. The woman knelt to Emily's level, speaking directly to her rather than over her head to Grant, something Emily wasn't used to from adults. "We've been expecting you," Dr. Frost said. "Would you like to see your room? We've set it up with some books and art supplies." Inside, the rehabilitation center buzzed with activity. Children of various ages moved through bright hallways, some in wheelchairs like Emily's, others with different mobility aids. For the first time in months, Emily didn't feel like the odd one out. Her private room overlooked a garden where several children were engaged in a modified basketball game. The walls were painted a soft yellow, and a bookshelf stood filled with titles she'd been longing to read. "Dinner is in 30 minutes, Dr. Frost explained. "Would you like to rest first, or would you prefer to meet some of the other children?" Emily surprised herself by choosing the latter. A therapist named Jason introduced her to 3 other residents close to her age. Among them was Lily, a bright-eyed 9-year-old with auburn hair who also used a wheelchair. "Your chair has cool wheels," Lily commented, pointing to Emily's custom wheelchair. "Did you design those patterns?" Emily nodded shyly, unused to receiving compliments rather than criticism. Over the next few days, Emily's schedule filled with physical therapy, art classes, and group activities designed to build confidence and independence. The staff spoke to her with respect, asked for her input, and celebrated her accomplishments, no matter how small. During art therapy, her natural creativity emerged as she designed colorful wheel covers for her chair. The therapist, noticing her talent, encouraged her to create more. "You could make these for other kids too," the woman suggested, and Emily felt a spark of excitement at the possibility. At night, Emily would sometimes cry, missing the mother who had disappeared from her life. But unlike at home with Loretta, here, someone always came when she called. The center became a sanctuary, where her condition wasn't treated as a burden, but simply as one part of who she was. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily began to smile again. Loretta Palmer stood before her bathroom mirror, carefully applying another coat of mascara. The face that stared back was practiced perfection, every feature arranged to convey sincerity and maternal concern. This was war, and image was her weapon of choice. "That man has no right," she muttered, rehearsing the lines she would deliver at the country club luncheon. "Who does he think he is, barging into our home and traumatizing my stepdaughter?" Within 48 hours of Grant Westmore's intervention, Loretta had transformed from villain to victim in the eyes of Connecticut's elite social circles. She moved through the community with calculated grace, her voice breaking at just the right moments when describing how a publicity-hungry millionaire had disrupted their family healing process. "Emily's condition requires consistency," she told Diane Whitfield, wife of the hospital board president, over mimosas. "This man knows nothing about her medical needs. He's using her disability for some sort of redemption project." The whispers spread through manicured lawns and marble-countered kitchens. Grant's reputation, once sterling in business circles, began acquiring tarnish. Questions emerged about his motives. Was this about helping a child, or assuaging guilt over his own daughter's tragic story? The real estate mogul's private nature suddenly seemed suspicious rather than dignified. Harold, oblivious to his wife's true nature, became her unwitting spokesman. "We're just concerned about proper channels," he explained at a town council meeting, his political connections lending credibility to Loretta's narrative. "There are systems in place to protect vulnerable children. Systems Mr. Blank Wyoran Westmore has completely circumvented." Local news outlets, initially sympathetic to Emily's plight, began running balanced pieces questioning the legality of Grant's actions. The Westmore Foundation's annual charity gala saw a 20% drop in attendance as families quietly distanced themselves from potential controversy. What Loretta understood, and Grant initially failed to grasp, was how deeply Connecticut's affluent communities valued appearances. Scandal threatened property values. Messy custody battles suggested instability. The community's resistance to public disorder worked powerfully in her favor. "I just want what's best for Emily," Loretta repeated, dabbing non-existent tears from her eyes at the Rotary Club meeting. "This has been so difficult for our family." Meanwhile, Emily flourished at the rehabilitation center, blissfully unaware of the public relations battle raging around her. The girl who had sobbed on her carpet was finding her voice again, surrounded by supportive staff and new friends. But Loretta's influence stretched further than expected. 3 board members of Grant's Foundation quietly withdrew support, citing concerns about recent developments. The stepmother's campaign was working, buying her precious time and weakening Grant's position just when Emily needed him most. The morning sunlight streamed through the rehabilitation center's windows, casting golden patterns across Emily's sketchbook. For the first time in months, the 8-year-old's face held something beyond fear. Determination sparkled in her eyes as she meticulously drew colorful designs for wheelchair accessories. "What about sparkly wheel covers with changeable themes?" Emily asked Nurse Jenna, who leaned over with genuine interest. "Kids could have superhero wheels on Monday and unicorns on Tuesday." The rehabilitation center had become Emily's sanctuary since Grant Westmore's intervention 3 weeks ago. Here, surrounded by supportive staff and children facing similar challenges, she was slowly rediscovering her voice. The girl who had once cowered under Loretta's cruel gaze now raised her hand during group activities and shared ideas during craft time. "I think that's brilliant," Maria said during her daily visit. The caretaker had been instrumental in alerting Grant to Emily's situation, and now watched with quiet pride as her young friend blossomed. "When I was your age, I would have loved unicorn wheels." Emily's project had started as simple sketches, but quickly evolved into something more substantial. With encouragement from the center's occupational therapist, she began prototyping using craft supplies, attaching colorful foam pieces to her own wheelchair, designing removable armrest covers with hidden pockets, and creating personalized spoke decorations that caught the light when she moved. "I want kids to feel special, not different," Emily explained to Dr. Ramirez during their therapy session. "Loretta made me feel broken. I don't want anyone else to feel that way." The rehabilitation staff marveled at her resilience. The child who had arrived withdrawn and tearful was now organizing mini fashion shows with other wheelchair users, showcasing their customized mobility devices with infectious enthusiasm. Grant visited twice weekly, bringing new art supplies and listening intently as Emily shared her expanding vision. "We could make a whole company," she told him, eyes wide with possibility. "Kids everywhere could design their own chairs." Her growing confidence extended beyond the creative project. Emily began participating in physical therapy with renewed determination, strengthening her upper body and learning new transfer techniques. She made friends with Zoe, another girl her age with a different mobility impairment, and they became inseparable during recreation hours. The rehabilitation center's director noted Emily's transformation in her progress reports. "Patient shows remarkable emotional resilience and social growth," she wrote. "Creative expression has provided therapeutic benefits beyond our initial expectations." For Emily, each colorful accessory design represented something Loretta had tried to take away: her dignity, her voice, her joy. As her sketchbook filled with increasingly sophisticated ideas, she reclaimed pieces of herself that her stepmother had attempted to crush. The wheelchair that Loretta had used as a tool of control was becoming, in Emily's hands, a canvas for self-expression and empowerment. Grant Westmore sat in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Hartman and Associates, surrounded by 3 attorneys and a child welfare specialist. The real estate mogul's fingers drummed impatiently on the polished table as his lead lawyer outlined the legal strategy to challenge Loretta's guardianship of Emily. "Connecticut family courts move slowly, Mr. Westmore," explained Judith Hartman, her silver-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "We're filing for emergency temporary custody, but Loretta has already secured powerful representation." Grant leaned forward, his jaw set with determination. "I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. That little girl deserves better." The legal process proved even more frustrating than anticipated. For every motion filed, Loretta's team responded with delays and procedural objections. Court dates were postponed twice due to scheduling conflicts that Grant suspected were entirely manufactured. Each passing day meant Emily remained vulnerable. Despite the temporary safety of the rehabilitation center, "She's playing the system," Grant muttered to Maria during one of their update meetings. The caretaker nodded solemnly, her eyes reflecting the same concern that kept him awake at night. Public opinion, which Grant had never particularly courted or cared about, suddenly became a battlefield. A shaky smartphone video of his confrontation with Loretta had surfaced online, showing only his forceful entrance and commanding tone, without the context of Emily's tears or her stepmother's cruelty. The 15-second clip spread rapidly across social media platforms. Entitled Millionaire Bullies Local Mother, read one headline. The comments section filled with assumptions about his motives, questioning why a wealthy bachelor would involve himself in a family matter. Harold, Loretta's politically connected husband, leveraged his relationships with local media to further spin the narrative. Mr. Westmore's foundation does admirable work, he told reporters with practiced sincerity. But his methods are concerning. Family matters should be handled with sensitivity, not intimidation. Grant's public relations team urged him to counter with a media campaign of his own, but he refused. "I won't use Emily as a prop," he insisted. "Her dignity matters more than my reputation." Instead, he doubled his legal efforts, hiring investigators to dig deeper into Loretta's past. The process drained his energy and tested his patience. But each time he visited Emily at the rehabilitation center, watching her tentative smile grow more confident, his resolve strengthened. "Sometimes doing the right thing makes you look like the bad guy," Grant told his legal team during a particularly discouraging meeting. "I can live with that. What I can't live with is walking away when I know that child needs help." As autumn leaves began to fall across Connecticut, the millionaire prepared for a long battle. Knowing that justice for Emily would require more than money and influence, it would demand persistence in the face of a system that moved too slowly for those who needed it most. The autumn leaves scattered across the courthouse steps as Loretta emerged, her arm linked with Harold Jenkins, Connecticut's rising political star. Their wedding had been swift and strategic, a quiet ceremony at the county clerk's office just 3 days earlier. The local newspaper ran a small announcement, portraying them as a power couple dedicated to family values and community service. "Harold and I are simply overjoyed," Loretta told the small gathering of reporters, her voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity. "And we're both committed to providing Emily with the stable home she deserves." What the politician didn't know was that his new bride had spent the previous evening meticulously reviewing Emily's trust fund documents. The substantial inheritance left by the girl's maternal grandmother would become accessible for medical and educational needs with the right legal guardianship, a detail Loretta had discovered months ago. Harold, with his immaculate reputation and connections throughout the state's legal system, was the perfect shield for her ambitions. The man genuinely believed he was rescuing a vulnerable woman and her disabled stepdaughter from an interfering millionaire. His political advisors even suggested the narrative could boost his upcoming campaign, the protective family man against wealthy overreach. "Grant Westmore's interference is concerning," Harold stated at a community breakfast, adjusting his carefully knotted tie. "While his philanthropy is admirable, removing a child from her home raises serious questions about boundaries and proper channels." Behind closed doors, Loretta was orchestrating a more insidious campaign. She hired a public relations specialist with connections to 3 local news outlets. Stories began appearing questioning Grant's foundation finances and suggesting his interest in Emily might be inappropriate attention toward a vulnerable child. Grant's team scrambled to counter the allegations, but the whispers spread through Connecticut's conservative neighborhoods like wildfire. The rehabilitation center where Emily stayed received concerned calls from donors, and several board members suggested temporarily suspending. "This is exactly what she wants," Maria whispered to Grant during their emergency meeting at his office. The caretaker's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. "She's isolating Emily again, just more cleverly this time." Grant nodded grimly, watching rain streak down the windows of his foundation headquarters. "Harold's judicial connections have already delayed our custody hearing twice," he said, "and 3 families have withdrawn from our wheelchair accessibility program since those articles appeared." What neither realized was that Loretta had already scheduled meetings with 2 trustees of Emily's estate, presenting herself and Harold as the perfect guardians for both the child and her considerable inheritance. The web she wove grew tighter by the day, threatening to strangle not just Emily's freedom, but the hope Grant had fought to provide. Emily had just finished her physical therapy session when she noticed something was different. Nurse Kathy, the kind-hearted woman who had become her favorite staff member at the rehabilitation center, was nowhere to be found. Instead, a stern-faced nurse she'd never seen before handed her a cup of water without making eye contact. "Where's Nurse Kathy?" Emily asked, her voice small in the sterile hallway. "She's been reassigned," the new nurse replied curtly. "I'm Nurse Pamela. I'll be taking over your care from now on." The 8-year-old felt her stomach tighten. Kathy had been the one constant in her daily routine, the person who made her laugh during painful exercises and who understood exactly how to position her wheelchair for maximum comfort. Without her, the center felt suddenly cold and unfamiliar. What Emily couldn't know was that Loretta had visited the center's director 2 days earlier, a thick envelope changing hands over coffee. The stepmother had smiled sweetly as she explained her concerns about Kathy's influence, suggesting the nurse was undermining parental authority. Money spoke louder than ethics, and by that afternoon, Kathy had been reassigned to another facility across town. That evening, as Emily sat alone in her room, Maria arrived with dinner and a strange envelope. "This came for you," the caretaker said, her expression unreadable. "The director asked me to give it to you." Inside was a letter, supposedly from Emily's mother. The handwriting looked vaguely familiar, but something felt wrong. "I left because I wanted a new life without the burden of a disabled child," the letter read. "Please don't try to find me. I've moved on." Emily's hands trembled as tears blurred her vision. The words cut deeper than any physical pain she'd ever experienced. She had clung to memories of her mother's warm smile, her gentle hands braiding Emily's hair, her promises that she would always return. Now those memories seemed like lies. "This can't be real," she whispered. But doubt had already taken root. Maria watched the child's face crumple and felt sick knowing this was another of Loretta's cruel manipulations. The caretaker recognized the forgery but couldn't prove it yet. She texted Grant Westmore immediately. "Emergency. New development. Call me." That night, Emily dreamed of her mother walking away, never looking back. She woke sobbing, reaching for the comfort of familiar faces that were no longer there. The rehabilitation center, once her sanctuary, had become another place where Loretta's influence could reach her, dismantling her support system piece by piece and replacing certainty with doubt. The letter sat on her nightstand, a paper weapon that had accomplished exactly what Loretta intended, destabilizing Emily's sense of self and severing one more connection to her past. Maria Rodriguez clutched her cell phone tightly as she sat in her small apartment. Surrounded by stacks of papers and printouts, the caretaker had barely slept for days, her conscience weighing heavily on her shoulders. If only she had spoken up sooner about what was happening to Emily. Now, she was determined to make things right, even if it meant risking her own livelihood. "There has to be something," she whispered, scrolling through social media profiles and public records. Maria had taken to spending every free moment investigating Loretta's past, searching for any inconsistency or red flag that might help Grant Westmore's legal case. Her kitchen table had become a makeshift detective's desk, covered with notes about Loretta's previous residences and relationships. The breakthrough came when Maria discovered Loretta had lived in 3 different states in 5 years, always attaching herself to wealthy, vulnerable families. In each location, there were whispers of financial impropriety, though nothing had ever stuck. Maria carefully documented everything, her hands trembling with both exhaustion and purpose. Meanwhile, at the rehabilitation center, Emily was experiencing something she hadn't felt in a long time: genuine friendship. Sophia Jenkins, a 12-year-old girl with spina bifida in the adjacent room, had taken Emily under her wing. The older girl's confidence and humor were infectious. "You know what I call this thing?" Sophia said one afternoon, patting the arm of her wheelchair. "My throne, and that makes me royalty." Emily giggled, a sound that had become increasingly common in the safe environment of the center. "Does that make me a princess?" Obviously, Sophia replied with a theatrical eye roll, and princesses don't let stepmothers push them around. Their bond grew stronger through shared experiences and understanding that went beyond words. When Emily struggled with physical therapy, feeling defeated and small, Sophia would wheel alongside her, offering quiet encouragement. When nightmares of Loretta taking away her mobility haunted Emily, Sophia taught her breathing techniques that helped chase the fear away. Back in his office, Grant reviewed the latest reports from his legal team. Progress was frustratingly slow, but he refused to give up. The millionaire had invested not just his money, but his heart in this case. When Maria called with her findings about Loretta's suspicious pattern of behavior, he felt a surge of hope. "This could be exactly what we need," he told her, his voice filled with gratitude. "You're doing more than you know, Maria." These twin lifelines, Maria's determined investigation and Sophia's unwavering friendship, became Emily's anchors as the legal storm continued to rage around her. In the midst of adult battles and courtroom maneuvers, these connections reminded her that she wasn't fighting alone. Autumn painted Connecticut's landscape in vibrant oranges and reds as the annual Harvest Festival transformed the town square. Emily had spent weeks preparing for this moment, her fingers working tirelessly on colorful spoke guards and personalized accessories for her wheelchair. The rehabilitation center staff had encouraged her project, seeing how it rekindled her creative spirit after months of Loretta's systematic emotional abuse. "Are you ready?" Grant Westmore asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair with genuine warmth in his eyes. Emily nodded, though butterflies danced in her stomach. This would be her first public appearance since the custody battle began, and she clutched the fabric bag containing her creations. The 8-year-old had designed wheelchair accessories that combined functionality with whimsical patterns, spoke covers that sparkled in sunlight, and comfortable handle grips decorated with intricate designs. As Grant wheeled her toward the children's crafts exhibition, whispers followed them. Many townspeople recognized the millionaire, but few had seen Emily since Grant's intervention. The rehabilitation center had become her sanctuary, shielding her from prying eyes and Loretta's influence. "Look at what Emily created," announced the crafts coordinator, displaying the wheelchair accessories on a table draped with autumn-colored cloth. These designs help children personalize their mobility devices. Curious festival-goers gathered around, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine admiration. A mother of a wheelchair-bound boy asked where she could purchase similar items, while a local artisan praised Emily's attention to detail. The child's face glowed with pride as she explained her inspiration behind each design. Across the festival grounds, Loretta arrived with Harold, her calculated timing ensuring maximum visibility. She wore an expensive dress in harvest colors and greeted influential community members with practiced charm. The politician seemed oblivious to his wife's true intentions as she steered conversations toward her concern for her stepdaughter's well-being. "It's simply heartbreaking how Grant has isolated Emily from her family," Loretta confided to the mayor's wife, dabbing at non-existent tears. "Harold and I just want what's best for her." But her performance fell flat when several attendees mentioned Emily's impressive display. Word of the child's creative achievement spread through the festival, drawing more visitors to her booth. Even Judge Rowley, who would ultimately decide Emily's fate, stopped by to admire her work. By afternoon, local support had visibly shifted. Community members who had previously avoided taking sides now openly praised Emily and questioned Loretta's narrative. Maria, watching from a discreet distance, couldn't help but smile as she witnessed the town's perception changing. The Harvest Festival marked a turning point, not just for public opinion, but for Emily herself. For the first time since losing her mother, she felt truly seen, her worth no longer defined by Loretta's cruelty, but by her own creativity and resilience. The manila envelope landed on Grant Westmore's desk with a soft thud. Inside were bank statements that Samantha Reed, an investigative journalist from the Hartford Gazette, had obtained through sources she refused to name. Grant's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. "These transactions from Emily's trust fund don't add up," Samantha explained, pointing to highlighted figures. Loretta's been siphoning money for months, small amounts to avoid detection, but they total over $50,000. The millionaire ran his hand through his silver-streaked hair, jaw tightening. This was the evidence they needed, yet he knew Loretta wouldn't go down without a fight. The journalist had followed an anonymous tip that led her through a labyrinth of shell accounts and falsified paperwork. "There's more," she continued. 3 separate withdrawals coincide with payments to Westlake Academy, a boarding school in Switzerland. The implication was clear. Loretta had been planning to ship Emily overseas, away from scrutiny and potential intervention. While Grant's legal team worked to incorporate this new evidence, Maria discovered something equally disturbing. The social worker's report, crucial documentation of Emily's emotional state and living conditions, had been sanitized. All mentions of the wheelchair incident and Emily's tearful testimonies about emotional abuse had vanished from the official record. "Someone got to Diane Peterson," Maria whispered during their hurried meeting at the rehabilitation center. The caretaker looked over her shoulder, paranoid about being overheard. "The original report I saw had pages of concerns. This new version makes it sound like Emily's just being difficult." Grant slammed his fist against the wall, startling a passing nurse. "Loretta has connections everywhere," he muttered. "First the center's director, now this." That evening, as rain pelted the windows of his estate, Grant paced his study. Each new obstacle only strengthened his resolve. He thought of Emily, who, despite everything, had begun designing a prototype for wheelchair accessories that would help other children express themselves. "We need to go public," his attorney advised during their late-night conference call. "The court of public opinion might be our only leverage now." Grant hesitated. Exposing Emily to media scrutiny felt wrong, yet keeping silent was allowing Loretta's manipulation to continue unchecked. He picked up the framed photo on his desk, Emily at the rehabilitation center, smiling for the first time since he'd met her. "No," he finally decided. "We fight this legally, without dragging her through the spotlight. Find the original social worker and get a sworn statement." As thunder crashed outside, Grant knew their battle had reached a critical juncture. Loretta's corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, but with each revelation, her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. The morning of Emily's long-awaited return to school arrived with promise. After months at the rehabilitation center, the 8-year-old had been looking forward to showing her classmates the colorful accessories she designed for her custom wheelchair. Her bags were packed, her outfit carefully chosen, but when Maria arrived to help her prepare, panic quickly set in. "Where's my chair?" Emily asked, her voice small as they searched her room. The wheelchair that had become her canvas for self-expression, adorned with hand-painted flowers and ribbons, was nowhere to be found. Maria's face tightened with concern. "I left it right here by your bed last night." She helped Emily onto the temporary loaner chair from the center while they continued searching the house. Grant Westmore arrived within 20 minutes of Maria's frantic call. The millionaire's jaw clenched as he organized search parties throughout the property. "We'll find it," he assured Emily, though worry creased his brow. The timing was too suspicious to be coincidental. It was Harold's gardener who made the discovery 3 hours later. In Loretta's garage, behind stacked boxes of holiday decorations, lay Emily's wheelchair, methodically dismantled. The wheels had been removed, the frame unscrewed, and the custom-fitted seat cushions slashed. The accessories Emily had created were crushed beneath a workbench. When confronted, Loretta feigned ignorance. "It must have been vandals," she insisted, her performance almost flawless except for the slight curl at the corner of her mouth. "Perhaps this is a sign Emily isn't ready for public school yet." The local officer taking statements seemed uncertain what to make of the situation. "Without witnesses, ma'am," he explained apologetically to Maria, "it's difficult to prove who did this." Emily sat silently in the borrowed chair, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the broken pieces of her independence. That evening, Grant paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what strings you have to pull," he told his attorney. "We need emergency intervention. This isn't just about custody anymore. This is about her safety." News of the incident spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. At the coffee shop, the bookstore, and the community center, conversations turned to Emily's situation. Some neighbors who had previously defended Loretta began questioning their judgment. "I always thought she was just strict," whispered one woman at the pharmacy. "But destroying a child's wheelchair? That's cruelty." As Grant arranged for a new, even better wheelchair to be rushed to Connecticut, Emily sat by her window, watching autumn leaves fall. "She can break my chair," she whispered to Maria, her small hands clenched into fists, "but she can't break me anymore." Grant Westmore stared at the official letter in disbelief. The foundation that supported dozens of children like Emily was being subjected to a comprehensive financial audit, effective immediately. The timing couldn't have been worse. The rehabilitation center's funding hung in the balance, just as Emily was making remarkable progress with her new wheelchair accessories project. "This is her doing," Grant muttered, crumpling the paper in his fist. He knew Loretta's fingerprints were all over this, though nothing could be proven. The millionaire paced his office, the Connecticut autumn leaves visible through floor-to-ceiling windows that normally brought him peace. Maria entered with a concerned expression. The center called. "They're worried about continuing Emily's therapy if the funding freezes." "Tell them not to worry," Grant replied, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll cover everything personally if necessary." The real estate mogul had built his empire from nothing. He wouldn't let bureaucracy or Loretta's machinations destroy what mattered most. That evening, Grant received a call from an old contact in the legal system. "I found something you should see," the voice said cryptically, "about Emily's stepmother. It's from Massachusetts records, sealed by court order." The next morning, Grant sat in a dimly lit office across from his investigator, examining documents that painted a disturbing picture. 5 years earlier, Loretta had been involved in another guardianship case, one where she gained control of an elderly relative's estate through manipulation and documented emotional abuse. The case was settled privately, the investigator explained, records sealed as part of the agreement. She moved to Connecticut afterward and reinvented herself. Grant's hands trembled slightly as he processed the information. This explains her playbook with Emily. The isolation, the psychological manipulation, the focus on controlling assets. The problem is, the investigator cautioned, these records remain legally sealed. Using them directly could compromise your position. Grant nodded, understanding the delicate balance. He couldn't use the documents in court, but knowing Loretta's pattern gave him a strategic advantage. The philanthropist now recognized her tactics for what they were, calculated moves from someone who had done this before. As he drove home, passing the rehabilitation center where Emily spent her days, Grant felt both hope and determination solidify within him. The audit might slow him down, but these revelations about Loretta's past strengthened his resolve. The battle for Emily's future had just gained a new dimension. "We'll protect you," he whispered, thinking of the 8-year-old girl who had somehow become the center of his world. "No matter what it takes." The Connecticut Superior Courthouse buzzed with tension as Emily's custody hearing reached its climax. Reporters crowded the marble hallway, while local dignitaries filled the polished oak benches, their whispers creating an undercurrent of anticipation. Judge Howard Rowley, a man whose 30 years on the bench had earned him both respect and a reputation for unwavering propriety, surveyed the packed courtroom with a furrowed brow. Grant Westmore sat rigid beside his attorney, his normally commanding presence softened only when his gaze fell on Emily. The 8-year-old looked impossibly small in her wheelchair, positioned at the front of the gallery. She clutched a small sketchbook, her latest wheelchair accessory designs visible on its pages. "This court will not be swayed by wealth or social standing," Judge Rowley announced, his voice echoing through the hushed room. "Only by what serves the child's best interests." Loretta projected practiced vulnerability, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Her husband Harold sat beside her, his politician smile strained as the prosecution presented financial records showing suspicious transfers from Emily's trust fund. Your Honor, Loretta's attorney argued, Mr. Westmore has no legal standing. He's merely a wealthy man with a savior complex, inserting himself where he doesn't belong. The judge listened impassively, but his expression shifted when Emily's medical records were presented, documenting her regression during Loretta's guardianship and her remarkable improvement at the rehabilitation center. The child needs stability, not the whims of a millionaire, Loretta interjected, breaking protocol. The outburst earned her a stern rebuke from the bench. When Emily's social worker testified about her observations, carefully avoiding mention of the altered reports, the courtroom grew still. She described finding Emily alone for hours, her wheelchair deliberately placed out of reach. In my 20 years of practice, she stated firmly, I've rarely seen such calculated isolation of a child with disabilities. Judge Rowley removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Community expectations weighed heavily. Many still viewed Loretta as the wrong stepmother, while others questioned Grant's motives. After reviewing the evidence before me, the judge finally announced, I find sufficient cause for concern regarding the child's current living situation. The courtroom held its collective breath. Temporary custody of Emily is granted to Grant Westmore, pending further investigation into these serious allegations. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Emily's face bloomed with cautious hope, while Loretta's mask of composure cracked momentarily, revealing raw fury beneath. As they exited the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Grant shielded Emily from the chaos, while Harold hurriedly guided his seething wife to their waiting vehicle. The town's social fabric had been torn open. Text messages and phone calls spread the news within minutes. The Millionaire had won this round, but everyone knew Loretta wouldn't surrender without a fight. The manila envelope arrived at Grant's foundation office with no return address, just a hastily scrawled urgent across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper and several photographs that would change everything. Grant Westmore's hands trembled as he read the letter, detailing how Emily's mother, Diane, hadn't abandoned her daughter. She had been recovering from a devastating car accident in Switzerland, her medical bills secretly paid by Emily's trust fund. Money Loretta had been siphoning for nearly 2 years. She's alive, Grant whispered to Maria, who stood frozen by his desk. The caretaker's eyes filled with tears as she examined the photos of Diane in a rehabilitation facility, dated just 3 weeks earlier. Emily needs to know, Maria said, her voice breaking. But how could Loretta hide something this significant? The Millionaire's jaw tightened. Because as long as Diane was missing, Loretta maintained control of Emily's inheritance through her marriage to Harold. That same afternoon, Emily wheeled herself down the hallway of her father's house, where she was visiting for the weekend. She had intended to retrieve a book from the study when she heard Loretta's voice, sharp and threatening, coming from behind the partially closed door. You'll say nothing about Diane's condition, Loretta hissed. Unless you want everyone to know about Atlantic City, your gambling debts would ruin you, Thomas. Emily's father's voice was weak, defeated. She's my daughter. She deserves to know her mother is alive. She's your burden, Loretta countered, and without me, you'd be raising a disabled child alone while dodging creditors. Emily's heart pounded as she silently backed her wheelchair away from the door. Her hands shook on the wheels, but her mind was suddenly clear. Everything, the wheelchair being taken away, the isolation, the cruelty, had been about money and control, not love or family. When Grant arrived to collect her that evening, Emily was waiting with her belongings packed. I heard them, she said simply. Mom's alive, and Loretta's been hiding her. Grant knelt beside her wheelchair, his expression gentle but serious. We know. We found her. For the first time in years, Emily felt something beyond hope, certainty. As they drove away, she watched her childhood home recede in the side mirror. The web of lies was unraveling thread by thread, and though the truth was painful, it was also freeing. "When can I see her?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite everything. "Soon," Grant promised, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Very soon." Grant Westmore stood at the window of his estate, watching Emily practice her speech in the garden below. The morning light caught her determined expression as she gestured animatedly from her wheelchair. His chest tightened with a familiar ache. She had the same passionate spark his daughter had possessed before the accident. "You're doing it again," Maria said softly, appearing at his side with coffee. Comparing them. The millionaire accepted the cup with a nod. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you both for months." The caretaker placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Your motives matter less than your actions, and your actions have saved her." Grant turned away, unable to voice the doubt that had been gnawing at him. Was he helping Emily because she deserved it, or because she filled the void his daughter had left? The question haunted his quieter moments, making him wonder if his rescue had been selfish at its core. Later that afternoon, Emily rolled into his study, her face flushed with excitement. "I finished my speech. Will you listen to it?" "Of course," he replied, clearing space among the legal documents that still dominated his desk, remnants of the ongoing battle with Loretta. The girl straightened her posture and began reciting words that belied her 8 years. She spoke of dignity, of the right to mobility, of how a wheelchair wasn't a limitation but an extension of freedom. Her voice grew stronger with each sentence, no trace remaining of the frightened child who had sobbed on Willow Creek Lane. "What do you think?" she asked when she finished. "I think," Grant said, swallowing the lump in his throat, "that you're going to change minds at that conference." Emily wheeled closer, studying his face. "You look sad." "Not sad. Proud." He hesitated. "Emily, do you ever feel like I'm trying to make you into someone else?" She considered this with surprising maturity. "You mean your daughter?" Grant nodded, startled by her perception. "Maria told me about her," Emily admitted, "but you've never made me feel like a replacement. You've made me feel like me, just a better version." Across town, Loretta paced her living room, rehearsing arguments with Harold for their final court appearance. Her plans were unraveling, but she refused to surrender control of Emily's inheritance without a fight. Meanwhile, Emily spent the evening finalizing her presentation for the Youth Inclusion Conference. Each word she crafted was an act of defiance against the stepmother who had tried to silence her. With Grant's resources and Maria's encouragement, she was reclaiming not just her voice, but her future, one that would no longer be defined by what Loretta had taken, but by what Emily herself would build. The Founders Parade transformed Main Street into a celebration of community and resilience. Emily sat proudly in her newly designed wheelchair, adorned with colorful streamers that matched the spring banners lining the route. When the Master of Ceremonies introduced her as the youth speaker, Grant Westmore gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You've got this," he whispered. Emily wheeled herself to the microphone stand, which had been thoughtfully adjusted to her height. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded her notes, but her voice rang clear across the town square. "A year ago, I believed my wheelchair was my prison," she began. "Today, I know it's my freedom." The crowd fell silent as the 8-year-old spoke about inclusion, dignity, and the power of community. She thanked those who had supported her journey. Without naming names, her grateful glance toward Grant and Maria spoke volumes. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Elderly residents stood from their seats, parents lifted children to see, and even Judge Rowley, attending in an unofficial capacity, wiped away a tear. Later that evening, Emily returned to the house on Willow Creek Lane, not as a prisoner, but as its heart. The property that had once echoed with her sobs now resonated with her laughter, as she and Grant hosted a small celebration for those who had stood by them through the custody battle. I never thought I'd hear music in these rooms again, Maria confessed, watching Emily demonstrate her latest wheelchair trick to an admiring group of friends from the rehabilitation center. The caretaker had become more than staff. She was family now. Her quiet courage during the investigation having earned her a permanent place in their unconventional household. She moved about the kitchen with comfortable familiarity, preparing Emily's favorite strawberry lemonade. As Connecticut's harsh winter yielded to spring, the transformation extended beyond the seasonal. Grant, once known primarily for his business acumen and wealth, found himself embracing a role he'd never anticipated. The millionaire who had burst through that door months ago in righteous anger now sat patiently helping Emily with her science project, his expression softening whenever she mastered a new concept. "We're planting a garden tomorrow," Emily announced during dinner, her eyes bright with plans. "Mr. Westmore says I can design the whole layout." "Grant," he corrected gently, "remember our deal." She nodded, smiling at their private understanding. Names mattered. Boundaries mattered. And in this house, unlike before, her voice mattered most of all. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, Emily wheeled herself onto the porch. Grant followed, draping a light blanket over her shoulders against the spring chill. Together they watched fireflies emerge, two souls finding healing in shared silence and the promise of tomorrow. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Rowley entered with his final decision. Months of legal battles had culminated in this moment, with Emily sitting nervously beside Grant Westmore. Across the aisle, Loretta maintained her practiced poise, though the cracks in her facade were beginning to show. "The court has reviewed substantial evidence," Judge Rowley announced, his voice echoing through the packed room, "including financial records that reveal Mrs. Loretta's marriage to Harold Peterson was orchestrated primarily to gain legal advantage and control over Emily's trust fund and estate." Gasps rippled through the audience. The judge continued, detailing how Loretta had systematically manipulated circumstances, including hiding information about Emily's mother's accident abroad. Harold's face paled as he realized the extent of his wife's deception. Given these findings, the judge concluded, "This court grants permanent custody of Emily to Mr. Grant Westmore, with immediate effect." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. The nightmare was truly over. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment as Loretta was escorted out, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Outside the courthouse, autumn sunlight bathed the scene in golden hues as cameras flashed. Grant knelt beside Emily, his hand resting gently on the colorful wheel of her newly designed chair. The same model she had helped create for other children with mobility challenges. "We did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Not just me," she said, "all of us." Maria stood nearby, finally free from the guilt that had haunted her for so long. The caretaker had been instrumental in uncovering the evidence that ultimately exposed Loretta's schemes. In the weeks that followed, Emily's story spread beyond Connecticut, inspiring similar investigations into guardianship abuses nationwide. The Rehabilitation Center expanded its programs with renewed funding from Grant's Foundation, helping more children reclaim their independence. At home on Willow Creek Lane, now transformed into a warm, welcoming space, Emily worked on designs for her next wheelchair accessory collection. The house that had once imprisoned her now echoed with laughter and possibility. Grant, watching her work, realized his journey with Emily had healed something broken in himself as well. The millionaire who had once been defined by his wealth and loss had found purpose in protecting a child who needed him. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, wheeling her toward the kitchen where Maria was preparing a celebration meal. Emily smiled up at him. "Ready for everything," she replied, her voice strong and clear. The voice of a child who knew, at last, that she belonged.